Welcome to Pause for Faith. Welcome to the Christian faith in 100 objects. It's very good to be with you. Just let me check my settings. We're all good. And look, especially if you're watching live, welcome back. We had a pause last week with Pause for Faith just while I was catching up on a lot of other things. So it's great to be back streaming with you this morning and to think, as I say, about the meaning and the beauty and the goodness of creation. That's our topic for this morning. So right at the start of the scriptures, we read, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." This is the very beginning of Genesis, the very beginning of the scriptures. And we profess in our Christian faith, in the creeds, that God the Father Almighty is creator of heaven and earth, in the Apostles' Creed, of all that is seen and unseen, in the Nicene Creed that we pray as Christians most Sundays. So just listen to the language here, that we believe that this is the creation, not just the world, the universe, the cosmos, but we speak about the creation. It's not just a brute fact. It is a world, a universe that has come from somewhere, that has been created by a creator, and it has a meaning and a purpose that lies beyond what we can see. I spoke a few sessions ago about this idea of exitus and redditus, those two Latin words, that in the scriptures, and especially in the theology of St. Thomas Aquinas, this would be one of his big overarching themes. The exitus, the redditus, how all things come from God. They come out of God. They exit. They are from his hands, but they're returning back to him. They're on a journey back towards the heart of God. But to be careful that we don't just romanticize this. We don't just have this beautiful, sweet images of sunset and newborn babies. There is so much beauty in the creation, but there's a lot of difficult questions as well about what it means to be alive. What is this creation? There's a lot of darkness and suffering and evil, and we can come onto this a little bit more in another session. That's not the focus today, but just how do we understand creation? Well, I just want to think through with you some of the wonderful passages in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, just to bring together the Christian understanding and some of the teaching from the scriptures. There's different ways of thinking about the creation and the universe. You might be someone of faith, you might be a Christian, and you think, well, yes, God made the world, and this is my core belief. But remember, there are lots of different possible worldviews. You might be a materialist who thinks there is no ultimate origin or cause. There is just the matter that exists and always has existed. You might think that somehow this whole universe itself is God. It is the ultimate cause of itself, its meaning. It's maybe something that we should worship. The creation. This is not an uncommon view in some cultures, and sometimes this is called pantheism, that God is everything and is within everything. Or a view that there's not just one creator behind all that exists, but that there are two eternal principles, good and evil, light and dark, in a kind of battle with each other for control, that creation is caught in the middle of this war, this tension between two principles. This is easily named dualism, two principles, dualism. Or maybe you've got some notion that God is there in the beginning, in the background. There must be a creator, an origin, but just the world then ticks over by itself. There's no creation, there's no ongoing creation between the distant God who created the world and the everyday reality of science and life and history. This is called deism. Deism, there's a God at the beginning, but he's not involved in his world. He's, as it were, abandoned this world. We can do a lot of thinking by ourselves. Yeah, we've got reason, we've got the gifts of science and good philosophy, and it will help us to see, if we do it well, I believe, that there must be some kind of cause or origin or beginning to the whole of of the universe, to the whole of creation. These are the traditional arguments for the existence of God. But reason will only get you so far. And in fact, we believe as Christians that we need the truth that God reveals to us about creation and the Creator, and that God has been teaching us through salvation history and through his chosen people, the Jews, and through Christ ultimately, and through the Holy Scriptures. We can't work all this out by ourselves. We need the help of God himself. We need the truth of revelation. And this is what we're exploring today. So what can we say as Christians, just to go through some of the Catechism and some of the key points from the Bible? What do we believe about creation? Why is there a creation? Well, the summary is the world was made for the glory of God. And St. Bonaventure, the Franciscan theologian, says that God created all things not to increase his glory, but to show it forth and to communicate it. This is important. There might be a little temptation to think, oh, God needed to create the world to make him more perfect, or somehow to make everything that is more perfect, to make God happier, as if God lacked something. Do you see the danger here? As if God wasn't perfect and he needed a little bit more perfection, or he wasn't fully happy and he needed a bit more happiness. No, God is perfect and completely happy and at peace with himself, not needing anything for all eternity. So he created to manifest his glory, to show it forth, to share it, but not to increase it. In that sense, creation wasn't necessary. It was a free gift. No one forced God's hands. It was created out of love. It was created according to his wisdom. It wasn't the product of necessity, nor just of blind chance. So God freely chose to create, and he created, as the psalmist says, "O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you made them all." The wisdom of God is guiding his creation, not just abandoning it. And a key biblical truth is that God creates the universe out of nothing. Out of nothing. It's not that there was something pre-existent and then God as a creator, a spiritual force, came just to give shape to this, because that would leave open the question of, well, where did this pre-existing stuff come from? Well, there is stuff in the universe, but the Christian biblical point is that everything is from the hands of God. All that exists, and there was nothing before, that God created out of nothing. And then that this creation is ordered. I spoke about this, speaking about the existence of God. We can look at the order of the world, the fact that there are natural laws and structures and an order about the universe that means it has an intelligibility. We can understand the universe, not all of it, but what we can see and know. The universe is unintelligible. It's not just that we're projecting our ideas onto it. We're learning about it. We're discovering the truth and the beauty and the order of the universe. And this is because God ordered his universe. To quote the scriptures, "You have arranged all things by measure and number and weight." And this is very poetic and biblical, but it's what science discovers. The only reason we can do science is because science believes. It's not a question of faith, but science believes, science takes for granted that there is a universe and that it is intelligible and ordered, and we can make sense of it and understand its explanations and its causes. The very fact of order, of harmony, of purpose and meaning in the universe is something that we discover and that we need to take for granted in order to understand the universe and do good science. And part of the order and the meaning of the universe is the goodness of the universe. God created the world in Genesis and saw that it was good, very good. Creation has a value. God willed creation as a gift to be celebrated, to be praised, and human beings are part of this purpose. It's not just that we are created, but the creation is partly in order to help us to know and praise the beauty of God through the beauty of his creation. Creation is partly a gift. It's not the only meaning for it, but it's part of the goodness of creation to see that it has value and purpose, and that we as human beings can appreciate that. So the whole of creation is ordered and good and held in God's hands, and more than this, every single thing within creation. We know that every object, every created object, comes from somewhere. It's going from somewhere. It has its own order. It points to a purpose and a meaning that gave rise to its existence. It's moving somewhere through time. So the whole of creation itself and everything within creation speaks about the order and beauty and harmony of creation and itself. And because of that, it points to God. But God is transcendent, infinitely greater than his works. He's not part of creation. He's present to creation as the creator, as the sustainer, but God is utterly beyond. St. Augustine says, God is higher than my highest and more inward than my most inward self. He's utterly beyond, and he's within and holding and sustaining everything and guiding everything through his providence. This is a really key fact about creation that we would maybe be able to intimate ourselves, but we only truly know because of the revelation of the scriptures. That God hasn't abandoned his creatures or his creation. That he is guiding the universe, that it is in a state of journeying, of coming towards a goal, an ultimate perfection. The witness of the scriptures to the way that God cares for the universe, for the creation, intimately. As I said, not just the philosophy of deism, that God created everything and set it going, but that he is blessing and guiding all that happens, working through the processes of creation and nature and history and science. It's what we call secondary causes. The world, the causality, the way things unfold. It's not, as it were, that God is stepping in to interfere all the time. It's that God is guiding this whole process of becoming and of causing and explaining. And this is part of his loving plan. And yes, sometimes he does step in, as it were, to do something in a very radical way, which we call a miracle, when we see God not just using the secondary causes, the unfolding of the created world and guiding those processes, but stepping in almost to do something out of nothing. Jesus speaks about the loving providence of God, and again. Jesus says, "Do not be anxious, saying, 'What shall we eat? What shall we drink?' Your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things." Your Father is guiding creation and is guiding your life. How then do we account for suffering and evil? Well, I want to come back to this. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to speak a little bit about that topic, that really difficult, important topic. But just one thing to say in the light of this theology of creation, that one objection might be, why didn't God create a perfect world where everything was fully finished and nothing could go wrong? And that's theoretically something that God could have done. But the answer is, God created a world which is journeying towards perfection and to its fulfillment. It's not fully formed at the beginning. It's a world of time and of unfolding and of becoming. And in his wisdom, he created this world where we, for example, as human beings, grow into our perfection and our happiness and our salvation. We don't arrive fully formed. And he only allows freedom and suffering and the potential harm that can come through misuse of our freedom. He only allows that because he knows he can bring good from anything and everything, and that he wants to bring good and salvation out of all that's happening. He creates a world where suffering and evil is possible. It's not that he wants the suffering or the evil, but it's a possibility, and he only allows it because he knows he wants to bring good and salvation out of everything. And we only fully see and understand this in the resurrection of Jesus. This is something we can only understand in faith. We look at the world and we can give philosophical answers, I think maybe this and maybe that. But in the death and resurrection of Jesus, we see that God has brought beauty and glory and joy and happiness and salvation out of a situation that seemed to be impossible, the suffering and death of Jesus. And so it's only in the light of the fulfillment of the resurrection that we can understand the meaning of creation. St. Catherine of Siena says, "Everything comes from love. All is ordained for the salvation of man, and God does nothing without this goal in mind." Okay, so some of this harm, this suffering, this damage to creation comes from our own hands. And it's so important, speaking about creation, to speak about the environment, the ecology, and the ecological crisis that we are living through now. This has been the concern of the Church and of popes for many decades, and especially of Pope Francis in his wonderful document, Laudato Si, written just 5 years ago, subtitled "On Care for Our Common Home," the care for our common home. And he's very clear to say right at the beginning that this isn't some new theology or doctrine that he's invented, but he's drawing on the teaching of the scriptures, and especially the teaching of the Church and of recent popes. He's looking at the environmental crisis, not just climate change, but pollution, the loss of biodiversity, the water security issue, global inequality. And he links all of this with the gospel of creation that we've been thinking about today. He says, when we learn that Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis were called to have dominion over the earth, this doesn't mean absolute domination over all creatures. Pope Francis writes, "This responsibility for God's earth means that human beings endowed with intelligence must respect the laws of nature and the delicate equilibria existing between the creatures of this world. We have an obligation to use the earth's goods responsibly. We're called to recognize that all living creatures have a value in the eyes of God. They bless him and they give him glory. The Lord rejoices in his works," as the psalmist says. And the Pope Francis, calls for an ecological conversion, and this lovely phrase, an integral ecology, so that as human beings, we are caring for the whole creation. We're caring for our environment, our society, our economy, our cultures. We're caring for what is in my hands today. We're caring for justice. And we see how all these different facets of human life and society and the creation fit together. We can't just separate one from the other. And is there an ultimate meaning to creation beyond the unfolding of time? Well, there's some beautiful passages in the scriptures about how creation itself will be fulfilled in God. Not just human beings, hopefully going to heaven, but creation itself somehow being brought into to share in the glory of God. We see this, first of all, in the body of Jesus in the resurrection. Jesus is resurrected, his whole being, including the matter, the material of his body. So Jesus, glorified, risen from the dead, ascended to heaven, existing in heaven now for all eternity, is the humanity of Jesus, including his created human body and soul. So the creation is brought into the presence of God, is lifted up into glory. St. Paul writes in Romans 8 that the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God, but also that the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. The hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. An amazing passage. Somehow the hope that we have for heaven as free creatures of body and soul, like the angels, the spiritual beings, the angels, the freedom and the glory that we amazingly are invited to share in, somehow the whole of creation will become part of that freedom and that glory. And as St. Paul says in Ephesians chapter 1, that Christ's plan for the fullness of time was to unite all things in him, things in heaven and earth, not just free creatures, not just my spiritual soul, but all things, human beings, body and soul, the created human nature of Jesus Christ, and somehow that all things, things in heaven and earth, will be united in Jesus Christ and brought to an ultimate fulfillment. That's the only way we can make ultimate sense of the meaning of creation and this journey of creation that we are on, and that everything that exists is on from the moment of creation to the end of time. So a few reflections about creation from the scriptures and from the Catechism. What's my object to summarize this? Well, look, I could have chosen everything, anything and everything, because everything is created. Here is my object. Very random, right? There is my object in a little bottle. I'll get it out. This hasn't been opened for ages. There is a rock, a little stone. Sorry, my face is in focus, not the rock. Can you see it? It's a little stone, a little rock. So I could say nothing else. Right? What's my symbol of creation? It is a created object, a rock, a stone, from presumably the heart of the earth at some time, from the heart of the universe. Here's a bit of creation. But this is a rock that I picked up 25 years ago when I was a seminarian visiting the Holy Land, walking along the Sea of Galilee near to Capernaum. I picked up a rock from the shore of the Lake of Galilee, a symbol of creation, but also, this is why I got it, treating it like a little relic, a rock that maybe, in theory, Jesus could have walked by, that Jesus might have stood on in his bare feet when he was walking along the shore, and that Jesus might have, in theory, I know it's a long shot, picked up and held in his hands and shown to his friends, just like I'm showing you now. So this rock, a symbol of creation, a part of creation, but possibly, very possibly, long shot, may be something that the Creator himself, Jesus Christ, true God and true man, that the Creator might have held in his hand this part of his creation. So this is a symbol of creation. It's also a symbol potentially of the Creator. And just as I hold this rock in my hands, to know that God holds the whole of creation in his hands, and that Jesus, the Creator, the Word of God, might have held this rock in his hands as well. Good to be with you. I'm back tomorrow. I think it's going to be thinking about the origin of sin and evil. So if you want to be back for that topic, I'll be back tomorrow. And tonight as well, streaming about the ways of praying at 7:30. Thanks for sharing this time with me. God bless.